Flight attendant slaps black billionaire's son not knowing his father is watching from first class. The hum of the jet engines buzzed beneath the quiet murmur of early boarding chatter. In row 24, a boy sat quietly, alone, anxious, but trying his best to stay composed. His name was Elijah Carter, 14 years old, with deep brown eyes that scanned each passenger as they passed. He clutched a backpack that had seen better days, its strap frayed, its zippers tired from years of loyal use. The oversized hoodie he wore nearly swallowed his wiry frame, but it offered him the comfort of invisibility. Elijah wasn't supposed to be flying alone, but life had its way of throwing curveballs. His mother had fallen ill in Atlanta, and his father, whom he hadn't seen in nearly 3 years, had arranged for his son to fly out from LA last minute. No one on board knew Elijah's last name was Carter. Even fewer knew that his father, seated quietly in 1A in first class, was none other than Donovan Carter, the billionaire tech entrepreneur behind the revolutionary CarterLink platform used by hospitals and relief agencies around the world. Donovan Carter hadn't announced his presence. He rarely did. He didn't travel with entourages or private jets unless absolutely necessary. Today, he simply needed to be on that flight. To see his son again. To fix the time that had stretched like a canyon between them. But Elijah didn't know any of that. He only knew that his stomach hurt from nerves, and that he felt entirely out of place. The flight attendant working the economy section was a woman named Claire. She had the polished poise of someone used to authority, and the curt tone of someone who had been in customer service just long enough to lose her patience for kindness. When she reached row 24 and saw Elijah, her expression tightened. "Seatbelt, young man," she snapped. Elijah startled and fumbled for the belt, tugging it across his lap. "And no hoodies during takeoff," Claire added. "It's a federal safety guideline." Elijah nodded, eyes downcast. "Sorry, ma'am." Claire didn't respond. She gave a terse nod and moved down the aisle. Elijah exhaled. From first class, Donovan sipped sparkling water, eyes scanning the economy cabin subtly. He spotted Elijah, his son looked just like him at that age. Donovan's heart ached, guilt and pride blending in his chest. He didn't know how to re-enter his son's life. He only knew he had to. The plane took off without incident. Elijah watched clouds drift by, wondering what his father would look like now. If he'd be kind. If he'd remember that he didn't like onions. If he'd hug him. A couple hours into the flight, a turbulence bump startled the cabin. Claire came down to distribute snacks. When she reached Elijah, she paused. "Where are your parents?" she asked. Elijah blinked. I'm flying to see my dad in Atlanta. He bought my ticket." Claire narrowed her eyes. "Flying alone, huh?" He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "What's his name?" "Elijah." "Elijah Carter." Claire's mouth twisted. She glanced at his backpack and the tattered sleeve. Something inside her hardened. "I'll need to see your boarding pass," she said. Elijah handed it over with trembling fingers. She inspected it, still frowning. "All right," she said at last. "Don't move around too much." "I just wanted some apple juice," he murmured. "What?" she snapped. He flinched. "I said. I was wondering if I could have apple juice." Claire's face pinched. "That's for premium economy. Not your section." "But the man next to me got." I said no. And then, before anyone could process what happened next, Claire slapped the back of Elijah's hand as he reached toward the tray she was serving. "Don't touch the cart," she barked. "You don't reach for things on an airplane. Didn't your parents teach you manners?" The slap wasn't hard, but it was loud. And humiliating. Several passengers turned to look. A woman a few rows ahead gasped. A man across the aisle said, "Whoa, hey, that was uncalled for." But Claire didn't seem fazed. "Stay in your seat," she said, eyes narrowed at Elijah. And don't cause trouble. In row 1A, Donovan Carter stood up. He'd seen it. Every second. The hesitation in Claire's voice. The judgment in her eyes. The slap. The way his son's shoulders had crumpled. He took a deep breath, stepped past the curtain separating first class from economy, and walked down the aisle slowly. Passengers turned as he passed, eyes wide. He stopped at row 24 and looked down at Elijah, who stared back in silent disbelief. "Hey, son," Donovan said softly. Elijah blinked. "Dad?" Donovan knelt beside him. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know this would happen. I should have flown back to you myself." Claire approached, confused and flustered. "Sir, you can't." Donovan stood. His eyes locked on hers. "You slapped my son," he said quietly. I didn't slap him, I watched it. From first class." Her face went pale. "You assumed," he said, his voice calm but cutting, "that because he was alone, because of how he looks, that he didn't belong." Sir, I didn't mean. Didn't mean to hit him? Or didn't mean to let your prejudice show?" he asked. The cabin had gone silent. Donovan turned to Elijah. "Come up front with me." Claire began to speak again, but Donovan turned to her once more. "I'd like to speak with the captain. Now." Within minutes, Elijah was seated in first class beside his father, still shaken but overwhelmed by the sudden change. I didn't know you were on this flight," he said quietly. "I wanted to surprise you. Be there when you landed." Elijah's eyes filled with tears. "She didn't like me. She looked at me like I was nothing." "You are everything to me," Donovan said. "And no one gets to make you feel small." In the hours that followed, the incident spiraled through the cabin like wildfire. Word spread. The pilot came out to personally apologize to Elijah. Claire was quietly removed from duty mid-flight. Another attendant, clearly shaken by what had happened, brought Elijah the apple juice he had asked for, plus a warm blanket, and a soft, "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." But what happened after the plane landed made headlines around the world. Donovan Carter didn't release a scathing press statement. He didn't sue the airline. He did something else entirely. The next morning, he held a press conference on the steps of an elementary school in Atlanta. "My son was disrespected and humiliated on a flight yesterday," he said. "Not because of anything he said or did, but because of what he looked like. Because someone assumed he didn't belong. But this story isn't about revenge. It's about what comes next." He announced the creation of the Elijah Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to promoting empathy and diversity training for airline and service industry workers nationwide. He pledged $10 million of his own money to get it started. But more importantly, he announced scholarships for underserved youth who dreamed of flying, whether as pilots, engineers, or flight crew. "I want kids like Elijah to feel like they belong at 30,000 feet, he said, "not just because they bought a ticket, but because their dreams lift higher than judgment ever could." The world listened. People cried watching the replay. Parents shared the story, teachers showed it in classrooms, and former flight attendants came forward with their own tales of bias and redemption. But the most profound moment came weeks later, when a new flight attendant walked up to Elijah at the airport and handed him a set of pilot wings. "I read about you," she said. "And I wanted you to know, you changed how I see my passengers." Elijah smiled, his father beside him, the future wide open. Sometimes the skies are turbulent. But sometimes, they clear, when truth is spoken, when justice is kind, and when love finds its voice at 30,000 feet. Let me know if you'd like a narrated version or story visuals to go with this.